Good morning, everybody. We'll take a couple more minutes to gather here. I just wanted to welcome everybody to our Museums Week Connecticut version.
I think we're good to go, Dan.
All right, thanks, Meg. Well, again, welcome everybody. I'm Dan Yeager, the Executive Director of the New England Museum Association. I'm delighted to see you here today. This is day 3 of New England Museums Week, and Connecticut is also always a very favorite stop along the way for us. You're always excellent advocates, excellent organizers, getting the word out about the importance of museums and cultural facilities. Take just a second to actually just let you know I'm kind of rebounding from a couple of minutes ago because I happened to catch President Zelensky's message to Congress. And I'm very moved because, you know, I'm really recognizing, as we all are, the world historical events that are happening around us. And then we, you know, come back into these moments of Zoom meetings and, you know, state advocacy days and so forth. And it seems perhaps a little, I don't know, shallow or inconsequential or whatever, our day-to-day lives when you see all of the chaos that's happening around us. But I'm reflecting on something here, and that is the fact that we are in the business that we are, in the arts, humanities, culture. We are culture bearers, and we have a great responsibility and a part that we're playing in this bigger picture of the world historical events. Might seem like it's small, but it is incredibly important because it's not just about us, it's about the people that we serve, about the history, the facts, the truth. That means something. It really means something to be part of this field. So I guess, you know, that's why we advocate. That's why it's important for us to go to work every day feeling fired up about what it is that we do and the contributions that we make to the United States, to the world, beyond, in our own small way. So I'm applauding all of us, and, you know, sort of let's tap into that inspiration that we get from somebody like President Zelensky and his bravery, and you know, realize that we're part of that. We're part of that fabric. We're doing good work. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Scarlett, over to you for land acknowledgement, and then off to Meg. Thank you, everybody, for the part you play.
Great. Thank you, Dan. And good morning, everyone. Thanks for being in space together with us. Virtual spaces cannot replace the lands that sustain and empower us. I'm at home in Worcester, Massachusetts, homelands of the Nipmuc Nation people and their allied tribes, past and present. NEMA recognizes that our organization and those of our members were founded within a colonizing society, which continues the exclusions and erasures of many Indigenous peoples throughout New England and beyond. I'm going to drop the Indigenous peoples land map in the chat here. You can find the lands where you're zooming in from or where your museum is located. And thank you all so much for being here this morning. Meg, over to you.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Let me go ahead and pull this up. Very happy to have you all here for part of New England Museum Week, our second ever. And we have, of course, always been very fond of getting to come do advocacy in Connecticut. And we're looking forward to doing that in person with you again soon. But for the meantime, I'm here to give you a couple of reminders for those of you who were not able to attend Advocacy Camp last month or who may be new to advocacy. A couple of tips and tricks and do's and don'ts for participating in New England Museum Week and advocacy going forward. You know, reflecting a little on what Dan said, I think museums advocacy is more important than ever. Some of you who may have heard me a few years back, I said at one point, oh, we're really lucky nobody hates museums. We're more popular than puppies and kittens. And that may have been true a few years ago, but it's very clear given that, you know, in one town in Ukraine, the Russian forces rolled in and the first person they arrested was the director of the History Museum, and the law that's been proposed in Idaho that would allow them to throw museum workers and librarians in jail for teaching dangerous topics. You know, it's really, really important that you're here. Advocacy is 90% about showing up. And so it's really, really good that you're here. And thank you very much. In any year that we advocate, there's always the eternal three, talking about budgets and tax policy and education policy. That is always going on. And we will get some updates from Liz shortly on what's happening in Connecticut right now. But this year, there are a lot of other important reasons to be tapping into civic engagement. So there is ongoing distribution of COVID relief packages still in discussion in a bunch of states here in New England. There are local revitalization initiatives where arts and culture organizations really need to be at the table for talking about, you know, revitalizing downtown areas post-COVID and that kind of thing. There are the midterm federal elections coming up. So if you have any interest whatsoever in doing voter registration or voter education, this is a really good year to be doing that. And a lot of states in the region have both legislative and gubernatorial elections coming up this year. So lots going on for those of us who are paying attention. And for people who, again, did not get a chance to go to advocacy camp or haven't had a chance to review the stuff that we sent out for you before this event, a couple of reminders about what is advocacy all about and what is and isn't safe to talk about as a nonprofit. Advocacy is along the sliding scale of interaction with the public that you already do. You already know how to do public relations, letting people know, hey, we're here, this is what we're up to. Education, where you are teaching people about your mission. Advocacy is also education. It's just a very specialized part of education where you're talking about, here's where our mission and our organization intersects with this cause or this particular piece of civic life or this policy or things like that. And then the final step in that scale is going on to lobbying, where you say, and now that you know this, we would like you to do X. And you are in fact allowed to do that. You can ask people as an employee of a nonprofit to support a bill or to vote against a bill. The one thing you really cannot do is talk specifically about people. You can talk about causes till you're blue in the face, but you cannot tell people who to vote for. So education is always fine. You can do as much advocacy as you want. You can do specific lobbying, like reach out to your congressperson and say, I would like you to support this, as long as it's less than about 10% of your job. The rules specifically for like when you have to register as a lobbyist do vary a little state to state. So you'll want to check what the rules are in Connecticut if you're at all worried about it. But generally, if it's less than 10% of your paid job, you're not going to get in trouble for contacting your legislators for anything. And you won't at all if you do it on your own time. So you can do things like send out questionnaires to candidates and be able to get their platforms on issues that are important to your museum. And then you can turn around and share those with your members and the general public. The thing you have to be most careful about when you're dealing with things around elections is that you have to be completely nonpartisan. Any opportunity you offer to candidates from one side, you have to offer to candidates from any other party. So if somebody wants to come hold an event at your site, you can say yes, but you also have to say yes if their opponents want to do something the next week. You can, like I said, distribute those questionnaires, but then you have to turn around and send them back out exactly as they got sent to you. You know, you cannot selectively edit them. You can't only publish some of them. You know, you can say, we sent this questionnaire to 4 candidates and only 2 of them responded. Here are their responses. And you can say, you know, these issues are important to us because, but you just cannot take that final step and say, and therefore we hope that you will support X when you go to the polls. If you are advocating as an individual, not as a representative of your organization, then just to be completely clear that you don't get it confused. So like, make sure that you're tweeting or emailing from your own account, do it on your own time, whether it's your lunch break or if you're on flex time, such that it's like typically normal work hours, but they're not technically your work hours, that's also fine. And if there are multiples of you representing your organization, make sure you talk to each other so that you're all passing along the same message, because you don't want to muddy the waters. Now, fortunately, most of the state houses are starting to open back up again to the general public, but virtual contact remains really important this year. Social media is still influential. Virtual town halls are something that a lot of legislators are continuing to do. They have listening sessions. Most of their offices put out newsletters. It's really useful to get yourself on those newsletters so you can find out what's important to them, and that will give you a sense of how to approach them in turn. And of course, email, phone calls, and virtual visits are all also still great. So as a guideline for today, we do have a letter template for you that you can customize if you want to send an email to any of your state or federal officials. We also recommend that you reach out to them on social media, tweet at them directly, make sure to use their handles so that you get their attention. Include some relevant hashtags. We would really appreciate it if you include hashtag New England Museum Week and Museums Advocacy in your tweet somewhere, because that allows us as the organizers to track the engagement and be able to get a sense of like how much impact might this advocacy campaign have had. Images are always eye-catching and really helpful. So you do already know how to do this. As Julie told us in our social media advocacy camp session, just pretend it's an exhibit label. Make sure you're using your punchiest facts. Pick the things that are going to stick in people's minds, be easy to understand, and that are, accurate and timely. So give them comparisons they understand. Give them reference points, etc. Here's a really good number for you to use. 96% of voters say they support government funding for museums, according to the Museums and Public Opinion poll that AAM did in 2017. We've also linked to Independent Sector did a more recent poll with other useful numbers on the nonprofit sector as a whole. So I think I actually tweeted that one yesterday. You can find it in the New England Museum Week hashtag that's got other things about support for nonprofits participating in advocacy and voter registration and things like that. So those are all really good in terms of setting the context in which your organization operates, but remember that the power of your story is really in your details. Be specific, be personal, be informative, make sure that you're not just blathering, but again, keep it punchy and keep it timely. If you've got statistics from pre-COVID, you want to be able to balance those with what's going on with your organization now so that you can paint a more accurate picture. People recognize that the last 2 or 3 years have caused a major shift in the field. And so data from 5 years ago is a lot less helpful than it was 3 years ago. You do not need to start from scratch. We've got a whole lot of templates that you can personalize. So on our website, we have a work your words worksheet that will give you basically like the general 3 to 5 sentence structure that you need to make an introduction and an ask to a public official. We've also got 4 different templates on how to create impact statements for economic, educational, environmental, and equity centered. And all of those are available for you to be able to look through and create. If not today, then in future for your advocacy efforts. And remember, you are never alone when advocating. You have all of these people who are here in today's webinar as your resources. And also there are a lot of organizations out there who are here to help you. We at NEMA, folks at AAM have great advocacy resources. Americans for the Arts and ASLH also turn out some great reports and resources. The History Relevance Organization has some fabulous talking points. Your state cultural and humanities councils are fantastic. State nonprofit networks. And of course, as I mentioned, we've been dropping some of our resources into the Museums Advocacy and New England Museum Week hashtags on Twitter for the past several weeks. So lots of good fodder in there to just scroll back and see what people are talking about. Quick reminder, when you especially are dealing with advocacy through text, whether it's social media or an email or whatever, without vocal inflections, make sure that you are paying a special attention to your attitude and how it's coming across in your language. Think about your audience, because some of your advocacy tweets you might be directing specifically at public officials, others you might be directing at your members or at people in the general public. And remember your asks. Make sure that you are building up to asking them to say, we're putting together information about how our school programs have impacted Connecticut school children for the last 50 years. If you ever went on a field trip to our organization, share your story here, reply to us at X. Or, share a favorite picture or a favorite memory of attending our organization. Or if you care about this the way our organization does, please reach out to your legislator and talk to them about supporting blah. When you are reaching out directly to your legislator, little research can go a long way. Scan their social media feed, see what they're talking about, find out if there are recent bills they've sponsored, et cetera, so you get a sense of what they care about, because you can then frame what you're asking of them in a way that is going to get their attention. And remember that you also are part of this. Your passions and your fears are really compelling. So don't forget to basically say, and this is why I care about this so much. Finally, an interaction like this where you're sending an email or a tweet or whatever, if you get any kind of acknowledgement back from the office, that is a really good stepping stone to further follow up, because advocacy is a long, slow game of relationship building. So if they like your tweet, you can then follow up with an email to say, thank you so much for interacting with us during New England Museum Week. We would like to follow up with an invitation to come visit our site, or things like that. Ask them how you can help in terms of giving them resources and stories and data from their districts, that kind of thing. And make sure that you thank them for their support of your organization. So that is my quick and dirty rundown of being a museum's advocate. My favorite number is that 100% of you are now ready to go out there and do some advocating. And don't forget your caffeine, because I did on Monday, and that was a very sad and sorry day. But I am now going to toss it over to our friend and partner in advocacy, Liz Shapiro, over at the Connecticut Office of the Arts, to let us know what's happening in state. Thanks so much, Liz.
Hey, Meg. And hi, everybody. And I just have to say that I don't think anybody does this better than Meg. Honestly, I go to a lot of advocacy stuff and workshops, and she is really good at this. So I will start with saying everything Meg said is absolutely true. And it's true on a federal level, but it's really true on a state level. And sometimes at a state level is where you can make more difference than you could ever expect. So I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes or so going through a bunch of things. As Meg said, I'm the director of the Connecticut Office of the Arts, which is the state arts agency. We're a partner with the NEA, just in the same way that Connecticut Humanities is a partner with the NEH. I also run the State Historic Preservation Office, and I know I have some staff on the phone. We have on the call today, I have 4 museums that we run. So because I have this crazy title, Director of Arts Preservation and Museums for the state of Connecticut, I get to put my little fingers into a lot of different pies. So it's really, really fun. But because I work for the state and we're in the DECD, Department of Economic and Community Development, we have a very, very direct tie to legislators. And in fact, I've spent a lot of hours in legislative committee hearings in the last 3 weeks. We are in the second year of a biennial budget. For you guys are from Connecticut, so you probably know that we do a 2-year budget. This is the second year of the 2-year budget, and that means we're in what's called a short session. So our short session started in the second week of February, the first week of February, and it ends on May 6th. So what I'm going to do is go through some legislative updates, go through some new budget stuff, and then I'm going to go through what happened in the budget for the entire biennial, because I think it's been an incredibly interesting time. And I think showing a time where in Connecticut, there's been unprecedented support for arts, culture, museums, humanities organizations. So in terms of legislative updates, I think there are 2 interesting things that are going on right now. It's kind of a quiet session in a lot of ways, and that often happens. But there's 2, there's a House bill and there's a House joint resolution, and I'm going to plop them into the chat when I'm done giving my report. The first is House Bill number 5374, and that is going to be important to most everybody on the call, because that is an act establishing a commission to commemorate the United States of America semiquincentennial. I always say America 250 because it's just too many letters going together and there's a Q in the middle of it. So it's really hard to say. It was much easier when I was in 4th grade and it was the bicentennial. But essentially this act will establish an official commission to organize around commemorating the United States 250th birthday celebration. And you can find the text of that bill in the link that I'm going to give you. Actually, it's a link. I'm going to give you a link for both of these two things. You can click on the link and then you have to do one more click to actually download the text of the bill as it stands now. But essentially it creates a commission, and the commission is, I don't know, it's like 15 people, you can see when you look at it, and it's a lot of the usual suspects, but it includes representatives from the federally recognized tribes in Connecticut, from the Amistad Museum, from the Connecticut Historical Society, State Library, SHPO's office, Connecticut Humanities, and the leadership of this commission, which is the highest level kind of commission, is sort of jointly held between the Secretary of State, Denise Merrill, who very much supports this, and Connecticut Humanities. So I think it's in the right hands. We crafted the legislation together and built it on the legislation that has already been approved in New Jersey and New York State. But just know that once there's a commission, then there's a million pathways to subcommittees and subgroups actually working on projects. So there is room for everyone to be involved in the planning of the semiquincentennial. I'm going to just practice it. The other thing that I think is really interesting is something that's coming out of Veterans Affairs, which is House Joint Resolution number 92. And it's a resolution recognizing Chief Harold Tantacridgen. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with Mohican history, but Chief Tantacridgen, the Tantacridgens are still an active family in Connecticut. And Chief Tantacridgen was very actively involved in the United States military during multiple times in history. He died in the 1980s. His sister, Gladys Tantacridgen, who maybe some of you know for running the Tantacridgen Museum, just passed away in the last 2 years, I think. But at any rate, I think it's interesting, and it's something to just pay attention to, that we're beginning to, the state legislature is beginning to actually look at histories that are not, that are just not the white retelling of the story. So those are the two interesting pieces of legislation. There's a few other things, and I'm always happy to answer any questions about them. The other things that are happening right now that I think are important, there is funding in this second year of the biennial budget for the summer, to bring back the Summer at the Museums program. We did it last summer, and there is $15 million for this summer and $12.5 million in the budget for next summer. The governor really likes this program, and it was created really to ensure that kids and families had educational opportunities with a low barrier to entry at museums across Connecticut. We ended up having only about 72 museums participate last year, but we're hoping that we have more for this year. There is funding involved with it. And that program, we sort of jointly create the guidelines for that program with Connecticut Humanities and the Office of the Arts, and a bunch of other players at the table. So we're excited about that. More to come. Pay attention. It's coming. The other thing that's exciting is some of you are familiar with the Good to Great grant program. That was launched in 2016. There was a round of funding in 2018. We were going to open with another round of applications in 2020, and then 2020 hit. So we put a hold on that. The Good to Great program is funded by bond funds, and it is designed to fund projects that will allow smaller organizations to improve their visitor services and through various projects. These are big ticket dollars. So the smallest grant amount right now is $25,000. You have to match a quarter of the grant right now with a cash match. We are limited to how we can change how we the basic underpinnings of the program because it is in state statute. But because we haven't run it for 2 years, there is a little over $10 million available to us. And I'm excited to say that this program as well will be launching applications, or will go live in September, sometime in mid-September. And this is a program that's going to be run off also by the Office of the Arts, the Office of Tourism, the State Historic Preservation Office, and Connecticut Humanities. It's a big, very labor-intensive program because of the source of the funds, which, as I said, are bond funded. But just to know that's coming. And then the other thing I just want to touch on is that for those of you who have been doing state advocacy here in Connecticut, we have an Arts, Culture, Tourism Caucus. That Arts, Culture, Tourism Caucus, culture, you know, we hate using that word, but when we talk about culture, that's kind of what we mean in terms of museums. I don't have much ability to change legislative language, but we do have ability by working together to change the legislative understanding of what our ecosystem looks like. So the caucus is firing up, and one of the charges that we are seeing is that state legislators, especially the co-chairs of appropriations, Senator Austin and Representative Walker, really are looking for data and information on who this ecosystem is, how it functions, and what its needs are. So we're working on getting that to them now. And so all the funding, remember all those annoying surveys that you had to fill out in order to get the Connecticut Cultural Fund money? Well, that's the stuff that we're sharing with them now. So we're really excited about that. To what Meg said, she noted at the beginning, one of the things that is happening is this idea of sort of centering arts, culture, museums, and municipalities. And that's sort of the opportunity that comes with the state and local recovery funds. Right now, we're working with funds from the American Rescue Plan. That's ARPA money. That's what we call it for short. And what I can say is that in our office, the two programs that I think dovetail really nicely with that are the cultural district program. And some of you, I know Ridgefield was our first cultural district, but a cultural district is a designation that you can get in your community when you have sort of a tight, walkable area that you consider to be ripe for arts and culture, restaurants, whatever. It includes a lot of things. And then we're also launching a program called AIR. And the AIR Institute is focused on what we refer to as ABBA, ABBA, which stands for Art Builds Business Builds Art. And art started off being just art, but really we're looking at art as centering all of the things that are arts, humanities, cultural related, because we know we can't talk about these things separately. And I will tell you the conversation is changing in how we use this language. So that's a really high level overview on what's happening. I'm going to be monitoring the chat. I know I can see sort of over, I'm looking at my report, but I can see that the chat people have put some things into it. I did want to let you know, though, that this year is the best year to reach out to your legislator and say thank you. And when I talk about legislators, I'm talking about your state legislators, not that you shouldn't say thank you to your federal legislators. But your state legislators this year have been extremely generous to arts and culture. So the total arts, humanities, museum, cultural funding for fiscal year 22, which will come to an end on June 30th of this year, was over $52 million. Generally speaking, the number is between $5 and $6 million. So there is a lot of money that's going out the door, and that includes the allocations for the summer at the museum program. That was $15 million in fiscal year 22. That'll be another $15 million fiscal year 23, 12.5 going forward. And that includes $20 million to Connecticut Humanities this year. That's the Cultural Operating Fund, and an additional $10.7 million to them the next year. So we are well funded this year. In fact, the per capita spending in arts and culture is the highest. Connecticut has the highest for this year. However, we have to be thinking to the years to come, and that's where all of you are so important. And then the last thing I would say is that it is so important to speak from a collective voice. It is really great for you to be talking to your legislator and telling them what you are doing. So do that now, do it often, do it well, follow up on it, do all the things Meg said. But when we are talking to something like the Appropriations Committee, when we are really wanting to make a difference, we are talking together. So I would encourage anyone who's ready to get involved in these conversations to follow and subscribe to the Arts, Culture, Tourism Legislative Caucus updates. They have meetings, those are public meetings, and those are meetings that if you are interested in this process, you should be there. And as I said, I'm happy to talk to anybody about this. I'm very fortunate to be kind of well connected to it now. And I will tell you that I am learning stuff every day that I didn't know like hours before. I know now because it's a complicated political scenario out there. So I'll end, and it is my great pleasure to turn it over to my colleague at Connecticut Humanities, my long-term colleague, Scott Wands, who many of you know. So Scott, I'll let you take it away.
Liz, and first, thanks to Nima, Dan, Scarlett, Meg, everyone for hosting this. It's always been great to be working with you for, I don't know how many years in a row we're doing this. It's at least half a dozen years getting together in March and talking about advocacy. And I think all that Liz was just talking about is an effort of all the work that we've been doing as a cultural community for many, many years now. And the collaborations and the partnerships that we're doing between Connecticut organizations, the New England Museum Association, the American Alliance of Museums, and really Connecticut Office of the Arts and Connecticut Humanities over the last several years, all working together, united, is leading to a lot of the great, exciting news that Liz was just sharing about what's happening in Connecticut. Liz, I put a couple of resources to the 250th in the chat, and there was a question from Candy, which I see you're answering there, and I couldn't remember what the other bill was that you were talking about, so I was trying to find the 250th and then lost train of thought, but I didn't put the other one in there. What I want to just talk to a little bit about, and I'm going to share a screen in a second, is kind of highlighting. Liz mentioned all the things that are going before the legislature and the sources of funding that are happening to museums. I want to kind of talk about what we're doing right now is we're coming together as a sector, and we have this unprecedented funding like Liz was talking about, how we're starting to work together with all of you and some of the things that you've done survey-wise to be able to advocate on your behalf, and what we're going to continue to do over the coming weeks and months to continue with that. So I'm going to share my screen here. So Liz talked a lot about the Connecticut Cultural Fund. This is that unprecedented funding that's in the budget for 2 years, $20 million in the current year's budget that we're in, and $10.7 million in the upcoming year's budget, which is supposed to go out at least 80% for operating support to the state's cultural institutions, arts, humanities, and cultural. I want to pause on right here is that the state is really starting to look at us as a unified sector. It's not humanities, history organizations over here, and arts organizations over there, and children's museums are up here. They're really seeing this as one larger unified sector, being described as museums by and large, but arts, culture, humanities working together. And that's led to the funding that's helped us in the pandemic in several different ways through state funds that have been deployed because of the CARES Act or the American Recovery Plan, and now has led to this funding from the state legislature to do operating support over the next couple of years. If you go to CTHumanities.org, we have a landing page for the grant line, but we're trying to transition this from being our traditional landing page where we're just telling you how to apply and who got the awards to being a resource that organizations in the state can continue to use during the life of this grant. And we have the full list of awards here. We had 632 organizations across the state, from the smallest all volunteer places to the largest organizations that we visit along the coast, like the seaport and the aquariums. And we want to start to transition this page here to having some information that you can use as we're starting to talk about ourselves as a unified sector. You can click the full list of awards, and you'll see we've got the 632 awards with over $16 million that went out just around Christmas time. We've divided it up by county and by town, and you can click every organization and learn more about who we are. And this is really the first time we've had a list quite like this. We've known we've got over 400 cultural institutions, We didn't know exactly how many. We know we haven't gotten everyone yet, and that's something we're going to be working on in the coming months and application cycles, is to bring in all those organizations that for one reason or other weren't able to apply, because this was not a situation where Bethel Arts was in competition with Bethel Jazz and only one of them was going to get money. Every eligible arts, humanities, cultural organization received operating support. Everyone received at least $5,000 and went up to $500,000. For the resources we're creating, we did a survey. We worked with Susie Wilkening, and Liz was talking about this. Data collection is going to be important. We want to be able to tell the state legislature, the governor, all of you, the general public, not just that we gave money out, but what this money enabled us to do, who we are as a sector, how we've grown as a sector. So we worked with Susie and we drafted and launched the Connecticut Cultural Census Survey for all the organizations that participated and received a grant. We have on our site a landing page for this, linkable off of a couple different places, including that operating support page. We've got data stories that are statewide. We've also broken up and done some data stories by county, so that you can see now, as a whole sector, we are museums, and this is using the AAM definition of museums, which is everything from zoos to aquariums to things with museum in their name. About 30% performing arts organizations and 16% other. We reach over 7 million participants, virtual and in person, last year, even though we're in the middle of a pandemic still. We employ over 12,000 people. We have over 1.2 million volunteer hours contributed. These are data that are on our site that you can use, and we hope that you will use as you talk to your audiences and talk to your legislature, and not only thanking them, as Liz said, but really highlighting who we are and what we do. We know that the pandemic is still impacting us. So the second data story we did statewide with Susie was to look at all the data you presented about the pandemic and its impact on us. And you can see here, not a surprise, in-person visitation was down from 2019 to 2021. Not a surprise that online engagement was up, but now we know that we're still not whole. We had 10.7 million people that we engaged in 2019. We're down 30% to 7.3 million people engaged in 2021, which is why we continue to need to advocate and have funds. We're hoping that 2022, and as we reach our seasonal open window, is going to be more of a normal season for us all. But we know that we still have some ways to go in places revenue are down, in places numbers are down. So we will continue to share this information out in whole, in part. We will share it on social media and little snippets of some of these facts. So continue to look for information coming up over the weeks and months. And this is why we're going to do a second survey with Susie as you wrap up your operating support grants with us, to see how is things improved, how have the numbers changed, visitation, ways of serving K through 12 students, use of creating materials online for online learning. These are some of the priorities of the legislature. They want to see employment, K through 12 education, online engagement really grow with the use of these funds. We're going to continue to help all of you be better at data collecting. We know this is something that is not a comfort area for all of us. So we are working with Susie to develop things like a tips sheet, which you can find on our website, again, under resources for grantees. We've got tips for collecting visitation and audience data. And this is quickly just some of the answers to questions that we've been getting in the launching of the survey and compiling of the data with Susie. We're really focusing on geographic, age, race, and ethnicity as some of the data points we want all of you to be collecting as best as possible over the coming weeks and months. If you are an organization that does online registration, there's some ways that you might be able to collect this during the ticketing or registration process. If you have frontline staff, there might be ways that you could collect this at the admissions. We know that what's important is doing stuff to the best of your ability. We don't want to scare people away. We don't want to have people not do data collection because they're overwhelmed. So if you're at big, busy events, providing estimates is going to be just fine. We want to get the best data, and we're going to keep giving you tips and tools to collect this more efficiently and more confidently going forward. We have some sample language of how you can collect this and questions to ask. Again, all data collection and ways of asking this stuff from the public should be optional and not required. Ways of gathering information, geographic, Connecticut, not Connecticut, age, children, adults, older adults, categories of race and ethnicity, so we can be tracking the stuff and gathering it in a unified manner. And we're not sort of doing it one way for one organization, a different way for a different organization. And Liz and us and some of the other surveys we know are coming, we're trying to align things so that you're not having to answer the same questions 3 different times in 3 slightly different ways. And we'll keep trying to align the questions as best as we can to that end. We are launching a survey right now with Susie, hopefully going to be finalizing this in the next couple of days, to do a general population survey of Connecticut residents to see what they think of us as a sector, and share this information with you all and with the legislature about the public, general public, museum goers, non-museum goers, performing arts attendees and not, what they think of our sector and if public money should be going towards it. We're working with Susie on a template for data collection that you can deploy and just drop your logo on and ask these questions with a tool that she's creating for us. And then we're going to do a workshop with her in the coming weeks, an hour-long virtual workshop where she will give tips and then answer all the questions that you have. We're going to keep finding ways to give you the tools so that you can collect the best data that we all can use to be the best museum advocates that we can be. So this is stuff that's working behind the scenes. We're working in partnership not only with the Office of the Arts, but with the Connecticut League of History organizations, and you can expect to see workshops and trainings and things that we're going to be doing all with Amrys and Emily and the Connecticut League. And I think this is a great way to transition to sharing it with my colleague Amrys Williams, who's going to talk a little bit about, we've been talking a lot about what's happening at the Connecticut level, but Amrys and I just participated a few weeks ago at the American Alliance of Museums Museum Advocacy 22, and want to share some information about what's been happening at the federal level and some issues that you might be interested in that AAM is advocating for us all on your behalf. Amrys?
Great, thank you, Scott. Hi, I'm Amrys Williams. I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut League of History Organizations, and I want to introduce and allow her to introduce herself. Our newest staff member, Emily Garfinkel, who's our new Membership and Programs Manager.
Good morning, everyone. So happy to be here. Today is actually my first day working with the League. So it's a great way to kick off and start. So yeah, just a little bit about myself, as today being my first day. I come from the Connecticut Restaurant Association, where I have been for the past couple of years. While I was working with them and kind of managing sort of the crazy pandemic, I'll just say that I'm no stranger to how COVID has, greatly affected the hospitality industry. So I sort of hail from, helping to manage and navigate that member base and, also working with DECD and other cooperating organizations. So it's very familiar language to me. But prior to that, I do have some experience with lobbying. I did work with a lobbying firm prior. I also worked with the Community Foundation of Southeastern Connecticut down in New London. When I worked with them, I worked to help with their Cradle to Career education program, which helped to partner local nonprofits in Southeastern Connecticut with New London Public Schools, and sort of managing that data piece with them and helping to collaborate with other organizations. I am a UConn alumni. I have my master's in public policy, and with that, I focused a lot on survey research, education policy, and nonprofit management as well. So thank you to Amrys for introducing me. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you and learning what's what. So thank you all.
Thanks so much. As you can tell, Emily's going to be a great asset to our team. So, and once again, this is, further evidence of the work that investment in our sector is doing. We would not be able to hire Emily without the investment in the cultural sector that the state has made. So, as Scott said, we participated in Museums Advocacy Day a few weeks back. This was, again, a virtual event. And I see that there are also a few folks here on the Zoom today who were a part of that process as well. The American Alliance of Museums organizes this event every year, and this was my second year participating. So I'll give you a quick overview of some of the major asks that we were speaking with the Connecticut delegation about in our virtual meetings, and share a little bit just to kind of wrap up what Liz and Scott and Meg and Dan have shared thus far. So our major asks to our delegation to a federal office were around a few areas. The first related to COVID relief and the way that, and continuing that COVID relief, ensuring that there is additional funding for the PPP program, for shuttered venues, and to encourage legislators to support perhaps changing the language in the shuttered venues operators grant to remove that fixed seating requirement that we know has made it impossible for most museums who have multi-use spaces and no fixed seating to access one of the larger pools of money for COVID relief. I know that pretty much everyone on this call has probably benefited from PPP. So if you are doing any outreach to your federal representatives, it's worth mentioning the impact that that's had on your organization. I know it's been important to the league, and I imagine it's been important to everyone on this call. So talking about the impact that has had at your organization is really wonderful. We also had an ask related to the Institute for Museum and Library Services Office of Museum Services, which, as many of you know, is a major granting organization that provides funding, to the museum sector. This is, an organization that tends to not have as much funding as it needs to fund the grants that come in, especially, all of the ones that are rated quite highly by reviewers. And so the ask there was, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, was around increasing, maybe Scott has them handy and he can pop them in the chat, was around increasing the funding for the Office of Museum Services for the next year with a robust funding increase for the FY 2023. We also had an ask around the National Endowment for the Humanities. NEH funding, many of you are familiar with the NEH, provides grants to universities, museums, libraries, and archives, other organizations to support research, collections care, public access to collections. I had an experience myself, which I shared, as a part of our advocacy. I served as an NEH reviewer. And one of the things that was difficult to know is that you rate these incredible proposals, which are coming from a real diversity of organizations, from large, city museums to, we had proposals from, small history organizations like we have here in Connecticut. And even many of the proposals, the person running the panel at the beginning said, basically like, you're going to rate some of these really highly, but we're only going to be able to fund like one or two of them. And that relates to the amount of funding that NEH has to distribute. So our ask around there was around increasing funding to the NEH. Now, most of you are probably more familiar with the significance of NEH funding that comes in through Connecticut Humanities to organizations like yours at the state level. And this is something that we talked with our delegation about as well. The importance of NEH funds, recovery funds, ARP funds, these have gone out through the SHARP grants that Connecticut Humanities recently awarded, as well as COVID relief funds that came through the CARES Act. And many of you have benefited from this funding. So we shared some of the data that Connecticut Humanities had around the impact that that's had in our sector, but these are things that you can talk about to your legislators, both at the state and federal level. If you have received any of these funds, and I imagine that many of you who are here on this call have, talk about the impact that that's had at your organization. What has it allowed you to do? And as Liz was saying, this is a really incredible moment to offer that thanks, so that in future years, when perhaps we are not so flush with funds, we have that ability to say, that relationship is already forged, and it's a friendly relationship, one where, we feel comfortable saying, okay, well, we have a relationship with you, understand our gratitude for the things that you have provided, and we can come to you with an ask, and not just come to you when we have that ask, but to come to you when we have gratitude and appreciation as well. And something that I think, I just want to say one more thing. I think we talked a bit about tax policy and the continuation of the charitable giving deduction that was introduced a few years back that is set to expire, but we're hoping will be extended, because we know the importance of charitable giving to our organizations. I believe the survey data that we were citing from AAM and their partners said that this is the legislation that has allowed people who aren't itemizing on their taxes to still deduct up to $300 for an individual, $600 for a couple in charitable donations. And the ask was to continue that and to also consider an increase to that cap. To really thank people for and allow people to, people are making these donations anyway, why not make it beneficial for them on their taxes to be able to deduct that. And we know from our experience, just anecdotally in conversations we had at Museums Advocacy Day last year, that this has had an impact at organizations. So if you have noticed an increase in like $300 donations, $600 donations at your organization, that's something to make a note of, because that's something that you can share as information with your legislators to demonstrate that this has had an impact for you. I think that the survey was saying there was an increase of like 29% in donations at those giving levels that coincided with that charitable deduction. So there's evidence that this is having a real impact at organizations. And lastly, I just want to say a couple of things about this as an opportunity, not just to thank your legislators, but also to invite them out to your sites to see what you're doing with these funds. Whether that's something that you do right now, or you want to share something that you're going to be doing as a result of a SHARP grant or operating support grant. This is the time to really do that, to forge those connections and make those relationships stronger and demonstrate what these funds have really meant to you and your organization and your community, to the constituency that your legislator represents. And when you're looking to perhaps use the wonderful templates that Meg at NEMA has put together for telling your advocacy story and making your ask, you can go back to that data that you gave Connecticut Humanities for the survey for the operating support grants, because you've already collected it. You have information, and now you can compare it as well to that statewide data that they've been able to compile with the survey with Susie Wilkening. So you have some numbers to work with as well, if you want to use those today in your tweets and online advocacy. And I just want to share one more thing, which is just about the kinds of work that the League is doing to distribute these funds to you as well. Through things like our museum makeover program. The first round of those grants is just about to go out. So if you've received one of those, that's a great thing to talk about, because this is related to not the federal funds, but that big infusion of state support that Liz was talking about. We are also, hiring staff. We're expanding our work, and we are improving Connecticut Collections, our online collections portal and collections management system, and making it easier for organizations to join by subsidizing data migration fees. So there's a lot of work that we're doing. I just wanted to share a couple of those things, but I think, especially with the great news that Liz just shared about the Good to Great program, I think that a lot of these funds, we're really trying to get them out in field services and in grant opportunities that really allow organizations to grow and improve, so that we can demonstrate to our legislators, both at the state and federal level, that this is money well spent in the state, in our communities, and that it's having an impact. And you all here on this call have the wonderful textured stories that really speak to legislators. So I encourage you to go out and share them today. I'll hand things back to the folks at NEMA. Thank you so much for organizing.
Thank you, Amrys, and thank you again to Scott and Liz. It's been so helpful to hear all of the exciting stuff that's happening in Connecticut and ways that people can be getting involved and staying involved going forward. So that's awesome. We have a few minutes left in case anybody has questions that you haven't dropped into the chat yet. Feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself to ask them now, or drop them in the chat if you don't feel like talking. And we would love to get to hear if anybody's got any questions or thoughts. And while you're thinking, I'm just going to remind you that kind of, the order of the business for today is to reach out to your members of the general public, reach out to your elected officials at whichever level feels most relevant to you. If you're using social media, don't forget to use the New England Museum Week hashtag so that we can track the engagement and be able to get a sense of the effectiveness of our advocacy campaign this year. And yeah, you are always welcome. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say to Liz's point, I mean, this is a great time. Meg's point is right. We have to reach out and contact our legislators, but it's a thank you time. It's a thank you for all the great support they've been giving. If you received an operating support grant, invite them out to your site, especially if you're a seasonal site getting ready to open up for the season. Show them what work you're doing and how these funds are going to be transforming your museum. So that's not just a thank you, but it's a thank you with an explanation and a demonstration of the work that you're doing and how this is helping hit their communities and the work that you all do. As Liz says, invite them after May 6th. They're a little busy right now, to Liz's point. They're in session, but you can start to work with them now in setting up meetings for when they're not in session.
Yeah, public thank yous or pictures of officials visiting your site as a like, hey, we remember when you came to visit us. We hope you come back, that kind of thing. All absolutely welcome. If you've got cute thank you letters from kids or any other kinds of things that are good to share. A lot of the kinds of things that you may already collect for grant reports are also equally useful for advocacy. So you may have more of that stuff lying around than you think you do right at your fingertips.
I'll jump in and say, oh, sorry, be quiet, Scott. I'll jump in and say that America 250, that is like hugely popular with all legislators. So that's a great, that's a little terrific thing. If you feel like, I don't know what to say to them when they come, or I don't know what to say to them besides thank you, that's kind of we're so excited that America 250 is, because every site, no matter what era that you interpret, is related to America 250 in some way, shape, or form. And
I put a link from AAM to a field guide that they created to help us do that, because this is not just about if you are a 1700s era site and had a bow pass through your building. This is a larger look that we want to have of where are we as a country, what were the ideals we tried to form when we became a country back in the 1700s, what have we achieved, where have we fallen short. It's about place, it's about people, it's about civics, it's about democracy, and there are tips and suggestions in that document that we all can share. And the only thing I was going to say was, Christine, I did see your photos. You did a great job putting that on social media as well, and got some great publicity out of it. So again, congratulations on that.
All right. Any last thoughts, Liz or Amrys or Scott or Dan? All right. Well, thank you all for being here. Go out and advocate. And we will see you in the wilds of New England Museum Week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Have a great day, everyone. All right.